What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the STR podcast, otherwise known as the Start the Rebuild podcast. I'm your co-host, Tim Fournier, alongside co-host Ian Meek Mills.
What's going on, folks? Timmy almost forgot his last name, but
Yeah,
that's okay.
almost.
We're having a good time.
Yeah, So today we're going over AFC North. My Ravens in there. Standings last year finished as the Bengals coming in first at 12-4, Ravens making the playoffs at 10-7. Steelers coming in at 9-8, and the Browns coming in at 7-10. Any immediate reactions from you from last year, Ian? I'll let you go first because I know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the Ravens are the one. Like, I'm not going to say, it does kind of seem like an open division, and that's not to like put any team down, but it just feels like at least obviously the Bengals are going to always be Super Bowl contender with Lamar healthy. I would say the Ravens are as well. And then the Steelers are interesting. We'll get into the Steelers. The Browns are the one team I'm kind of like probably a little bit low on. Like I don't see the upside with the Browns. I guess it depends on Deshaun Watson. I guess immediate reactions to it's going to be a fun race down the stretch, I think. And I don't think it's going to just be the Bengals and the Ravens. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I think as much as it pains me to say it, the Bengals have earned every right to be the betting favorite to win the division with the success they've had over the last few years. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins doing really well. I will say the Ravens last 2 years have been right in it until Lamar has been hurt kind of sort of towards the end of the years. There was a lot of controversy, especially this year when he sat out the last, what was it, 5 games or whatever it was, when it was like, was he really hurt? He was just upset about not having the contract yet and wasn't going to risk it. I don't really know, but we'll get into the Bengals a little bit here first. We'll do kind of what we did last time, go through their
Yeah.
depth chart a little bit, open up a little our lads. So yeah, the big thing with the Bengals offense, obviously they have great weapons. T. Higgins, Jamar Chase with Joe Burrow. Joe Mixon's good. The problem that is always comes up is their offensive line, and they've made some steps at trying to fix that, signing Orlando Brown. We kind of talked about him a little bit in the AFC West breakdown about how he was leaving the Chiefs, and he's not like some absolute game-changing left tackle that completely changes your offensive line. He's a good player. He's a good tackle. He's not
Yeah.
elite. I don't think this offensive line is anywhere near completely fixed.
The
But
way I'll say
he's the best.
we talked about it in last episode too about the O line, not the Bengals line, but just O line in general, about how it's not necessarily about like improving your best guy, but improving your worst guy. You know what I mean?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I think Orlando Brown, not to say, we've already said probably about everything that needs to be said on Orlando Brown, but the addition of a pretty good left tackle, only kind of elevates the entire unit rather than, maybe just one position.
Yeah. Um, Honestly, just like sitting here looking at this team, they're going to be really good. And like, it's hard to get into a lot of the nitty gritty when it's like we kind of already know what to expect with this team. The offense is going to be really good. Joe Burrow is going to be really consistent. He seems to, for as good as Joe Burrow is, and you don't really think of him as like a runner or anything, he seems to get himself in a lot of situations where he does get hurt. I mean, he has like the calf injury this year. He obviously missed a whole season with his ACL. Um, I will say that is like kind of an interesting thing. He's
They
always
haven't
dealing
had
with the
like
calf, and like Jamar Chase was like he should sit out till week 5 or whatever,
yeah.
and blah blah blah. But I don't know, something interesting to look at.
I think a lot of it just coincides with his O line being below average for most of his career. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Not to say that like so is Josh Allen's and Pat Mahomes. Obviously, I feel like their O line's fixed at this point. But we saw in the Super Bowl against the Bucks, they had that had to do with injuries and COVID and things like that. But their O line wasn't good then either. But I think not being as mobile and having a better line that contributes to just kind of dinks and dunks. And not to say he's like a huge guy either, but I guess in terms of their offense, you kind of mentioned everything. It's going to be a lot of weapons. I do, admittedly, maybe this is just like based off of like, oh, I liked him coming out of college, so I like him now. Irv Smith, I kind of like it. Like, I don't know. Maybe
Yeah,
that's
I
just
don't think they'll miss a beat. Hayden Hurst was fine and serviceable, and Irv Smith, I think, is going to be the same thing. Probably a little bit more athletic.
yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like,
Yeah.
he's about one of the more athletic tight ends in the league, and I don't know. I like the addition in terms of running backs. Obviously, losing Samaje Perine. I mean, I don't know. Joe Mixon's going to be the workhorse,
Yeah.
so to speak. So I
I
don't
feel
know how
like
much.
they could just pound Mixon into the ground this year and then just let him go. I think in the future, they could obviously just draft someone or sign someone, whatever
Mm,
it is. I do like Chase Brown out of Illinois, watching a lot of Big Ten football. I think he's a good player. I don't think he's like super dynamic.
yeah.
But I think he is a really, really good player. And if given opportunity, if Mixon was hurt or something like that, he'd be the person I would expect to take over and have some success. Kind of along those same lines, one person I just want to mention, Charlie Jones, is a really good player that also played in the Big Ten. I think he is going to seamlessly replace Tyler Boyd. I believe Tyler Boyd has like 1 year left on his contract. Not that that's like a super impactful thing, but it's something I want to mention because I do think he is a really good slot receiver. If you're good with everything on the offense, Ian, going to the defense.
Well, last thing I'll
Yeah,
ask
keep
real
going.
quick, and this is just to get an interest. I think there's an obvious answer to this question, at least there is to me. But I'll ask you. Well, it's kind of a two-parter. Do you think the Bengals going into the future can only pay one of Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase? And if they can only pay two of the three, who do you think is the odd man out? And I think there's probably an obvious answer to this, but I want to see
Yeah, I mean the odd man out would obviously be T. Higgins, but
okay.
yeah, I don't know. I never know with like NFL salary cap stuff because you would think that, and then you have teams like the Saints or something like that that have like 10 million void years on everyone's contract, and they all make it work, and then it seems like cap space doesn't even exist. But like, I don't know. I feel as being a Ravens fan, I very much want to say, yeah, T. Higgins has to be gone because they're not going to be able to pay all of them. But with the things I've seen NFL teams do, I feel like they're just going to make it work somehow, and it's going to be really annoying for me. That being said, the Bengals are known to be a very cheap franchise.
Yeah.
So that could play a huge role. So I'm holding out hope that one of the three is gone. And it's if any of them are leaving, it's gonna be T. Higgins.
It's T. Higgins, yeah.
Yeah.
He's what? What would you? He's top 20 receiver in the league.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Top
Um
20.
someone I was listening to some podcast the other day and they're like, yeah, T. Higgins would be the number one receiver on a lot of teams in the NFL. And like my knee-jerk reaction, probably some of my bias was like, oh, I mean, not that many teams. And then I kind of went through it in my head and it was like, yeah, he
It's not a
probably
double
would.
take. He
Yeah.
probably would be.
I mean, in this division, he'd be the number one wide receiver on the Ravens. He'd be the
Yeah.
best receiver on the Steelers.
Yeah.
I guess maybe you could argue Amari Cooper for the Browns, but I'd probably still take T. Higgins and younger and blah blah blah.
I mean, yeah, if you had to pay one at this point, you would pay T. Although Amari Cooper is actually not as old as we think, I don't think. But
Yeah,
all right, we'll go
he
to
was
the
really good
defense real
last year. And then like AFC East, I mean like
Amari Cooper's 29. He's older than I thought.
yeah, I would take Diggs, obviously. Garrett Wilson, I guess there's like an argument.
Yeah.
He wouldn't be the number one on the Dolphins.
He
Uh,
definitely would be the number one on the Patriots. He's not Juju's not as
yeah,
good
he'd
as
definitely be number one on the Patriots. But you get you
yeah.
kind of get the gist. Like he'd be the number one receiver on a lot of teams in the
Yeah.
NFL. As much as that pains me to say, because I hate this team.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to the defense. This is, I think, it like already gets talked about a lot in terms of how underrated of a like development the Bengals defense has had in terms of their team success. Like there's always the classic like person whenever someone's talking about the success of the Bengals and Joe Burrow and blah blah blah, like there'll be one person that I'll be like, well, actually, it's like their defense that like got so much better, and that's really why they went on their run or something like that. Which I think there is um
I think there's a lot of
to
truth to
that for
that,
sure.
honestly.
Like they wouldn't be going on this run without Joe Burrow developing into the player he
Sure.
is either. It's not like they were gonna do that. But their defense is very good, very well coached by Lou Anarumo. Um, Miles Murphy, first round pick. It'll be interesting to see what he kind of turns into because he had a really good second to last year at Clemson and then kind of fell off and was super highly rated recruit and kind of a lot of weird things I feel like went on at Clemson last year with people kind of sputtering.
It was
But
definitely an off year for them in
yeah,
general.
definitely. So I don't know. Maybe a lot of these teams got some value with Clemson players because of that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the front seven looks really good, to be honest. Miles Murphy being injected into that, but then Sam Hubbard, DJ Reader is one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL now. At this point, he's very underrated. BJ Hill's a good run stuffer, and Trey Hendrickson is a very good player as well. Linebacking core is really solid. Logan Wilson leading that, and the secondary is really solid. They are what the heck is the name of the safety that went to the Falcons? That was really good.
Oh,
I don't know why I can't think of his name right now.
I'll find it. But yeah. I mean, I was gonna say what I was gonna say was like, I guess the only thing I can think of with that team is like maybe like the only nitpicking is like, oh, maybe the DBs aren't as good as the rest of the defense. You know what I mean? But like,
Jesse Bates. I don't know why I couldn't think of his name. Very, very good free safety, really rangy on the back end that allows a lot of things to happen for Lou Anarumo's defense. So I think that's definitely going to be something to look out for. Going from Jesse Bates to Nick Scott is going to be a very big change. And I think having a rangy, very good free safety back there is kind of a key cog in a lot of these defenses. So it's going to be interesting for sure.
yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd add is that like if you look at the Bengals playoff history, I mean, you could say this literally with any team because like if your defense is good and your offense is good, you're gonna win. But like if only one is good, you might not win. Like they're in looking at the playoff history, like their defense has genuinely been like unreal the last couple of years.
And I think if
And
it's not as to the same level this year, that is going to be the reason why is Jesse Bates being that key
right,
cog that makes everything work here.
yeah.
Him and DJ Reader are the really big pieces of that defense, and they lost one. So
I mean, you look at the game against the Ravens last year, like you know what I mean. That it was a defensive game through and through, and in the playoffs,
yeah,
and
the Ravens very, very, very easily could have won that game.
yes. Oh,
No
I
doubt.
they should have. They. I mean, you know, maybe not should
Don't
have.
even get me started. Like
All
we
right,
don't
whatever.
have to
We'll
go
move on
through
to the
all
Bengals.
that,
We'll
but
move
I
on to the
mean,
Bengals.
jumping over the goal line from 3 yards away and having a 14-point swing in a low scoring game like that is the entire difference. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the Bengals breakdown. I think the only way you really see that huge step back, I think, is really looking at that Jesse Bates departure. And that's kind of already you're starting to see them trying to have to plan for that massive Joe Burrow contract, that massive Jamar Chase contract, that T. Higgins contract. That's already the first domino to fall. So me hoping for this to happen as well. That could be the beginning of the window that we've talked about with the Bills starting to close.
And maybe some Evan McPherson regression.
Yeah.
Trying to find some. Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like so much has gone right for this team,
It has.
and maybe
And,
that's just because I've been
and
rooting against them, but I'm ready for them to be on the wrong side of variance.
the fact that Lou didn't get head coaching job, whether that was by his own, choice or because he didn't get the good offer. Like that still blows me away.
Yeah, he's done
But
an amazing job.
it is what it is.
All right, now we're gonna look at the Ravens, which I am very excited for this year.
Did Odell fix the Ravens? I
I think
don't know.
what's gonna fix the Ravens is Lamar being on a contract where he's not gonna be like, oh, I have like a little injury and I don't want to risk getting hurt and I'm gonna sit out the rest of the year. First of all, that,
It,
but also Todd Monken
yeah.
and getting rid of Greg Roman. I think Greg Roman did a really good job helping Lamar and raising his floor because you saw when he first came in that, he when he was a rookie, like was not developed well as a passer at all. And I think Greg Roman really helped him up his floor where he was able to be very successful, even though he wasn't that developed. He still won 6 games as a rookie to and then put them into the playoffs that year and saved the whole season. But I think then once he was developed, Lamar, like after his MVP season, really was limited by Greg Roman and he didn't really allow him to break through in that ceiling to become, tier one, absolutely elite quarterback. And I think Todd Monken is going to help reach that ceiling. Maybe that's a little bit of a optimistic outlook, but this is also the best receiving core Lamar has already had or has ever had in his entire career, including his MVP season. His MVP season, he had Hollywood Brown with a screw in his foot that would play like every other week, and like that was the conversation every single time. And his wide receiver 2 was Willie Snead in like Chris Moore.
Yeah.
He now has first round pick Zay Flowers, first round pick Rashad Bateman, and Odell, who obviously is coming off massive injury and sat out for a year. How much are they really getting out of him? They were willing to pay him a decent amount of money, so I'm pretty confident in it. But even then, they actually have depth now as too. Like Devin Duvernay is a very good gadget player on offense and has made plays before. And Nelson Aguilar is a good deep threat. I mean, as your wide receiver 5, that's pretty good. By far the best receiving core he's ever had. Obviously, wide receiver 1, weapon number 1 is Mark Andrews, who's a top 2 tight end. And
Yeah.
his backup, Isaiah
Sure.
Likely, is someone that I absolutely love as well. So I'm
Yeah.
very, very, very optimistic. Offensive line is solid. One
I
question is left guard.
My optimism with the Ravens, I guess it really goes to two questions because I am optimistic. I think like it's easy to say like, hey, the Ravens were 10-7 last year with Lamar missing a significant amount of time. With if Lamar plays 17 games, they'll be good
Yeah.
again. Or
It's never
they're good.
1-1 like that. Right.
But I guess the only two things I would ask is like, yes, this is the best receiving core that he's ever had, but is it like that good? You know what I mean? Like it's just not
Sure.
to say that it's bad. It's just like how Zay Flowers, he's obviously what was the second slot guy off the board. And like I mean, like there were questions. He was projected to be like an early second round pick, late first, and that's where he ended up being. We'll see, and then Odell. You even mentioned with Odell, like what is he at this point in his career? He was like good when healthy with the Rams in that Super Bowl year. Obviously, a lot of stuff happened last year. I mean, he just didn't play. And the question, maybe not question, but with the Ravens, obviously a lot has been said. You mentioned the Greg Roman thing. A lot of what their production has been the last couple of years is the running game. I mean, what is J.K. Dobbins at this point? That's not to say like he isn't going to like.
Yeah,
Obviously,
he's an
he's
interesting question
healthy.
because he's
Like,
holding out for a contract right now,
yeah,
which is just like insane to me because he's barely played injury wise. And even when he came back last year, he was good, but he was very clearly still hampered by the injury. And now he's holding out for a contract as if he's done anything in the NFL.
right. And so if J.K. Dobbins doesn't play or misses significant time because of a holdout or injury, whatever, then you look at the rest of the roster, rest of their depth chart: Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, and Melvin Gordon. we this whole discussion with running backs lately has been like, oh, are they what are they? Are they worth money? Or are they the tread, the tread on their because the tread on their tires is the big thing. Like at a certain point, like I don't know, like is do you want Gus Edwards to be your RB1? You know what I mean? Like in an
Yeah.
offense that
And like
runs the
the
ball a
argument
lot.
before has always been with the Roman offense, it barely matters who your running back is. Like it's going to have success when Lamar's running that offense. And I think we're going to see a major shift in the way the offense is ran with Todd Monken. So I think you do have a point there where it's like with Greg Roman, it didn't really matter how great the receivers were because of the way the offense was set up and it would flow through Andrews and the run game and everything. And if it's having that switch, then yes, the receivers are better than they ever have been before for Lamar, but it might matter way more and then kind of cancel out in a way. I can definitely see that worry.
Yeah. And we even mentioned it before. It's like I don't want to be repetitive, but it's like it is the best receiving core, but like where would you rank it amongst AFC
Still not
teams?
that great. I think Zay Flowers could be so good, and I'm very excited for him. But Rashad Bateman is still hurt, and he's still on the pup, and he's not practicing, and foot injury, and blah blah blah. So I definitely have my worries there, and I see where you're coming from. I think the Ravens have offense. I said a very high floor and a low ceiling in terms of the way it's been set up. If they're playing against like a not very good defense, not very good team, they'll just dominate. And then if they're playing against a very good defense that's gap sound against a run game and everything like that, they struggle. And I think it's going to kind of change a little bit where they're going to have a better chance against the Bengals, the Chiefs, the Bills, or something like that. But you're not maybe going to see the same level of high floor that Greg Roman kind of brought. But I think this was kind of a necessary change that needed to happen. Like you can only be satisfied with 9-10 wins in a first round exit for so long.
Yeah.
So that's
That's
kind
very
of the offense. I think there's not really any holes except for left guard. They have a rookie from Oregon that is slated to start there as of right now. Everyone really wanted Ben Cleveland to start there because he's had some hype before, but apparently he's not winning that job. But across the board, other than that, Ronnie Stanley is elite. Tyler Linderbaum is a great young center. Kevin Zeitler is a great veteran guard, former Badger. Love to see that. And Morgan Moses is a solid tackle. So I mean, that's the only spot you could really point to as a hole on the offense. It's gonna be
maybe
interesting to see
Morgan,
how that all plays out.
yeah, maybe Moses regression, like that's
Yeah,
all. But
he also literally gets hurt and returns in every single game. So that's gonna happen, I guess. Defensively, the D line has some good young players. You're gonna see Calais Campbell leaving, so that's gonna be a veteran presence that's gone. Justin Madubuike, I think, could be a really good breakout player. Travis Jones is also a great young player. Michael Pierce is a solid nose tackle, and Broderick Washington has really come along in his career. So I'm pretty solid. I would like to see maybe a tiny bit more depth in that spot, but we'll see. Middle linebacker, inside linebacker is great. Roquan Smith, one of the best in the NFL. Patrick Queen has had his ups and downs, very volatile, but being kind of that number 2 to Roquan Smith, I think allows him to play into his strengths and his weaknesses don't show out as more. I think it's very similar to like a Levante David, Devin White kind of dynamic where there's one really solid guy you don't have to worry about at all. He's elite. And then kind of the weak side linebacker that's the better athlete, but isn't as smart. Kind of is able to have his highlight plays and have his weaknesses kind of shuffled under the rug by the other guy. Edge rusher is all right. Odafe Oweh, Tyus Bowser really need David Ojabo to come along as a young player. He got in towards the end of last year, coming back from that injury. He's kind of that X factor. As well as Trenton Simpson, who could maybe be something. He's kind of a hybrid player. They did bring in Jadeveon Clowney on a visit today. I think that would be really helpful for some depth. Not that he's like an elite player, but I think as another rotational guy, he'd be really good. And then the starters on the secondary are good. Marlon Humphrey is a very good corner. After that, I would say corner is probably the biggest hole on this defense. Rock Singh, you hope he's good. He had a camp injury, but kind of came back. And then it's a lot of young guys that like some of them maybe have some promise, but it's no one solidified. And then the safeties are very good. Kyle Hamilton plays all over the field. He plays safety, he plays nickel, he plays linebacker. Marcus Williams, great cover free safety with a lot of range. So I am very worried about maybe some edge rusher depth and corner behind Marlon Humphrey. If Marlon Humphrey gets hurt this year, they're screwed. And I'll kind of leave it at that. Justin Tucker, best kicker in the NFL. Great
yeah. I would just say with this team, with this unit, so to speak, just like kind of very high highs. Like, you know what I mean? Like Roquan Smith is probably top 3 linebacker in the league. Marlon Humphrey, is probably as good as you can get at this corner. Like consistently, like usually with the corners it kind of fluctuates, but I feel like Marlon Humphrey has consistently been one of the better in the league for several years. And then Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams, that is a very, very good unit. So it's like, the highs are very, very high. And then there's occasionally there's just like a couple holes in it. So I think the success of this team is going to come more from like health on the offense than anything though.
Yeah. I will say it feels like every year with the Ravens, for as long as I've been a fan, they have like 8 injuries to their corners, and it's the most frustrating thing ever. And then I already know it's going to be week 18. I think they play. I forget which divisional game it is. It might be the Bengals or something, week 18, or the Browns or Steelers or something. And it's going to be like Seymour on Jamar Chase, and Jamar Chase is going to moss him in the end zone. And I'm going to be like, why did we think this wasn't going to happen? Like, how does this happen every single year? Like the one game that always gets brought up in like the Bengals Ravens rivalry is when the Ravens had like 80 people out with COVID or whatever it was, and like Josh Johnson was the starting quarterback and Joe Burrow threw for 500 yards.
Yeah.
As if that was like something to be proud of, with the Ravens having like literally like SMU at corner, like that was the starting defense, was SMU's defense or something horrible. Like that always pisses me off, but that is nothing. We don't have to get into that.
Right.
I wish we could go into a season as a Ravens fan with like 4 corners that we're just like, yep, they're good players.
Yeah.
Never happens. It's a tough position to have good depth at, but that happens every year. But unless you have anything else, I think we covered that pretty well.
No, I mean, the last thing I would say is, I don't know. I kind of mentioned it, like you kind of said it, like the Bengals have earned every right to be the favorites, but like
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I feel like the Ravens you could get some pretty good value on them winning the division.
I think they have a higher ceiling this year than they have had in a long time, and I'm very excited for it. We'll see if they can meet that ceiling. But on to the Steelers. I hate the Steelers as well, but you have to talk about them. They're a very solid team. It seems like they're incapable of not having a winning record with Mike Tomlin. And in my opinion, they had one of, if not the best draft of any team this year. So they already won 9 games last year, and they started Mitch Trubisky for the first couple. So they're gonna be good again. How good are they? I don't think their ceiling is that high, but their floor is also very high.
I will say this is that
that.
I will say this is that looking at this team, I mean, Deontay Johnson, like he does drop balls, but I do think he has consistently been like, I don't know, I feel like he's been a really good receiver too. And I think George Pickens last year, it was like, I wouldn't even say like he had low lows. I just feel like because they weren't like their offense wasn't that explosive, he was just quieter, along stretches.
Yeah.
And then but then there were games where it was like, oh, this guy was, how did he go in the second round?
Right.
And even Allen Robinson, like obviously he struggled quite a bit in the Ram, with the Rams towards the end, but I feel like maybe there's something still left in that tank. I think when it comes to Kenny Pickett, right, like the question is like how big of a jump, if at all, is he going to take this year? And you would
Yeah.
hope that he would. But again, I think Matt Canada as an OC just
I have no idea how he's still there.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, I just feel like he limits his offense. I mean, like when Ben Roethlisberger was like in his last year, everyone just kind of was like, oh, they're running this offense because Ben Roethlisberger can't throw the ball downfield, and
Yeah.
but it really wasn't. Maybe that was the case, but it's the
And they didn't
offense.
change anything. Yeah. I
Yeah,
have no idea how.
when he go ahead.
I said I'm just reiterating. I have no idea how he's still there.
Yeah, I have no idea how he's there. And then looking at the rest of the team, I mean Najee Harris, like great rookie season, not so great sophomore campaign. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. Like this O line, like I think of the Najee's success, his rookie year was because of he was getting like infinite touches. Like it just felt like every time something was happening, they just like dumped the ball off to him because it was like, O line crashing down, whatever, just toss it to Najee. So I'm curious to see kind of how he rebounds from last year. And this O line just because it does kind of feel like I don't know, which is like paper mache together almost. Like it's just kind of
Yeah. The line looks fine. A lot of it hinges on Broderick Jones' first round pick panning out.
yeah.
This the ceiling of this offense is very capped, both with Matt Canada and honestly, I think Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett last year, I think there's some stat like 1.8% of his throws resulted in a touchdown, which is like the lowest number from a starter since like the early 90s. So statistically, that is going to positively regress. Like he could like double that number and still be well below league average. And I don't think he was horrible last year. That's just like something that was an outlier season that happened. So I do think fantasy wise, this isn't going to be a good offense, but it's going to positively regress. So there could be
Yeah.
some value there. Um, I will say this, just kind of like a random tangent. I really like Najee Harris, and I do think he is a good player. I think he is a little inefficient in the style of play that he has. The situation of it, first round running back, kind of like no name backup running back that is really like efficient, reminds me a lot of when the Chargers had Melvin Gordon first round pedigree, be a little bit inefficient but really good statistically and still like a good player. And then they had Austin Eckler behind him. Small school, no one really knew who he was, but all of a sudden he just like gets touches and is really good. I think Jalen Warren's really good, and I could see a similar like progression of that of what happened with the Chargers. I don't know what you think about that.
I don't necessarily disagree. I think we kind of touched on it a little bit where like the tread on running backs tires, like what is
Mhm.
that real? How real is it? And Najee, obviously, first round draft pick out of Bama, was very good there. And then, we can even mention like touch the ball a billion times. I felt like his rookie year. I almost said freshman year, rookie year. So like I don't necessarily disagree. Like it almost might come out of necessity though. Like it might just come out of it, say of like, hey, like like at a certain point, like we're gonna run Najee in his third year. He's gonna be kind of the Todd Gurley effect, where Todd Gurley was what 26, 27, and he just couldn't run anymore. So it might just come out of necessity. So I don't really disagree with you.
Yeah. It'll be very interesting to see how that all plays out. I still think Najee is a good player. I just think Jalen Warren is also a really good player. And I could see like I could see history repeating itself in that way.
I mean, running back by committee probably is your best way going forward, anyways. So you
Yeah.
know what I mean. It might just come out, and yeah, at a certain point they might just say it, kind of like the Tony Pollard Zeke Elliott thing, where it's like, oh, like Tony Pollard's better. You know what I mean? But like we
Right.
paid money, we have that first round, whatever. So
Right. All right, moving on to the defense. The defense, as it always is very, very good, very well coached. Obviously, you start with TJ Watt, really good player. And Alex Highsmith has been a really good running mate with him, especially last year. As one of the best, if not the best, edge rushing duos in the NFL. Alex Highsmith just got paid big money. He's someone that goes really under the radar. He's a really good player. TJ Watt, obviously one of the best in the NFL. Cameron Hayward, been a stud for a long time. Always solid. Getting up in age, so like maybe that drop off is coming, but he has shown no signs of it. Larry Ogunjobi, good player. Keanu Benton, Wisconsin Badger. A lot of it sucks that this is the team that has it, but they might have the most Wisconsin players in the NFL. They got TJ Watt, they drafted Nick Herbig, they drafted Keanu Benton, they have Isaiah Loudermilk. I don't know if I'm forgetting any. They have Nick Herbig's brother, didn't go to Wisconsin, but the big thing here, their linebackers are solid. Is their secondary leaves a little bit to be desired. Obviously, it starts with Minkah Fitzpatrick, who's an elite safety, but their corners are eh. Patrick Peterson had an okay season, getting older. With the Vikings, Shannon Sullivan sucks. Levi Wallace is a solid player. If Joey Porter really develops, I think he was one of the best picks in the draft. Somehow getting him in the second round. As a big, long, strong press corner out of Penn State. He could be a real X factor if he develops and is a really good player. This defense could be the best in the NFL if he really hit and you see him have one of those rare, really, really good rookie corner seasons that almost feels like it's been happening more often lately. Like he was like rookie corners are never good, and then all of a sudden there was like last year with Sauce Gardner and why can't I think of his name? Seattle corner that was really good from UTSA.
Oh, Tariq Woolen.
Greek Woolen, yeah.
And
So I
Derek
don't know.
Sanders.
Yeah. So we'll see. Like if he is like a really big hit and he plays really well, this could be the best defense in the NFL. And that's why their floor is so high.
Yeah. I do think like there's no way Joey Porter isn't starting by like week 5, right? Like I don't know, maybe that's an exaggeration, but like I do feel like maybe it's just because it was like the whole storybook thing with his dad,
Right.
obviously playing with the Steelers. Also yeah, you mentioned Patrick Peterson was solid last year, but obviously getting up there in age. I think, and he might be due for even more aggression at this point. Levi Wallace, I think, is a very solid cornerback too. Like I
Yeah.
think if Levi Wallace is your CB2, like you're definitely happy with that. You know what I
Right.
mean?
It's like
Um,
they just don't have that one lockdown corner.
Correct. Yeah. So I guess yeah, it depends on what Joey Porter is going to be, and obviously Minkah Fitzpatrick. It feels like when he was traded to the Patriots or Patriot. Why I keep saying Patriots traded to the Steelers. It was one of those things where it was just kind of like, oh, that was kind of weird that happened, and then it just worked out. Not weird that it happened for the Steelers, but just like it kind of felt, you know, random almost. But it's obviously worked out very well for the Steelers. And then yeah, you kind of mentioned it, right? TJ Watt. I do wonder like if he can solidify himself or cement himself back as the best kind of pass rusher in the league. Because I think obviously, he's certainly in that conversation, and then we'll see kind of, I mean, he missed some time last year. So yeah, I agree with you. The fact that this defense, like it just always feels like the Steelers defense is always going to be good. And just looking at their personnel, it seems as though that'll just be the case more so. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the biggest reason this team has that high of a floor is that this defense is very, very good. Overall, very solid team. Not a lot of holes across the board. I just think their ceiling is very limited with Matt Canada. The combination of Matt Canada and Kenny Pickett. I think Kenny Pickett is a good player. I don't think he's going to be amazing. He's going to be thrown into the same conversation that I think Mac Jones is in right now. And it's gonna
Yeah,
come a
we'll
day
see.
where he's got to get paid, and it's gonna be like, are we gonna trap ourselves into this for 4 to 5 years, or do we feel like we can move on? Because he's going to be the 15 to 20th best quarterback in the NFL come that time.
Yeah.
Do you want to be there? I don't know.
I guess it depends on how much they win in the next couple of years, right?
Right. And he's gonna have a high floor. Like he's gonna have a lot of wins to his name because he's in this franchise. So that's gonna be the most interesting conversation coming in a few years. But that's a little bit down the line, and we'll see what they're able to do. So I'm good to move on to the Browns if you are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So going to the Browns depth chart. Obviously, the biggest thing is Deshaun Watson. And if you like gun to your head right now, how do you think his season goes this year?
I don't know because you think about it
I think
last
this is
year.
the hardest question in the entire NFL right now in terms of
I,
predictions.
I think last year, how much of it was because he hadn't played football in a year and a half,
Right.
and obviously a lot. And he was suspended for 6 games, and then or was it 6 games? Yeah.
No, it
Um,
was like 10, 12, 11
you're right. So you're right. So he only played like 6 games. I guess is
because
what
he
I was trying
came
to say.
back for the Texans game, which was in like week 12 or 13 or
Which is
something.
insane that they let that happen. But
Well, that was definitely on purpose.
oh, it was 1,000%. I would imagine he'll be better than he was last year.
He's got to
Um,
be. He was so bad.
he was well. That's an easy thing to say. And so the way I would say it is that he will solidify himself back into like a top 12 quarterback because before the trade, like there were conversations like he was like a top 3 quarterback, and they were
Oh yeah.
justified. Like they were very, very justified. So I don't think he'll ever get back to that status.
I don't think so either. Like, I feel like there's a chance that he might just be bad now because simply because of like what kind of mental space are you in? Like with millions of people watching you every week and 99% of everyone watching wants to see you fail. Like
Yeah.
what kind of mental headspace are you in with everyone watching every single move you make and everyone rooting for you to fail? Like
And they're
maybe he'll
justified.
thrive in that position, but I think that would just destroy you mentally.
I will say this. Yeah, he's gonna be he's not gonna get closer where his ceiling was with the Texans. I said top 12. That's probably even a little bit too high. He's
He
far
has
away.
that talent,
Yeah.
clearly.
I will say this though, like looking at the rest of this offense, hey, Amari Cooper had an amazing year last year with Jacoby Brissett for most of it.
Mhm.
Nick Chubb, RB1 in the league, potentially,
Yeah,
like probably.
definitely in that conversation could easily be one.
When Elijah Moore was getting targeted, he was really good for the Jets.
Yeah,
Donovan Peoples-Jones as your receiver too is definitely not great, but it is kind of what it is.
he's a solid
Look,
player. I
yeah,
really
yeah,
like Cedric Tillman, rookie from Tennessee, I
yeah,
believe. Really good player. Made a couple plays in the Hall of Fame game, honestly, too.
yeah. And then looking at the O
Gadgets
line,
and Jakeem Grant, Marquise Goodwin, Anthony Schwartz, and Jalen Darden are all interesting.
yeah,
And the offensive line is elite.
yeah. That's what I was gonna say. Is like this is a really good O line. Like
Yeah.
Wyatt Teller, he's the one that got away for the Bills. I
Yep.
mean, you know what I mean? Like,
Imagine,
yes,
bro.
can't imagine it, man. Him over Rick Bates. Not that Rick Bates is a fine player, but he's not Wyatt Teller.
Yeah.
Um, and then Jack Conklin signed from the Titans not too long ago.
Yep.
Jedrick
Player.
Wills. What's that?
That's a very good player.
Yeah. Jedrick Wills. I mean, that O line draft, there's from that left tackle draft back in 2020, like it's like the meme, like you look back, it was special, or he was special. The Vince McMahon's like it's an insane draft for O line,
Yep.
and it's still so.
All the
I
talent,
think to
man.
look at Deshaun Watson, like how good is what's his ceiling? Like, hey, he has a really good offense around him. He might succeed simply because his offense is that good around him.
Yeah. They also got DeJuan Jones in the third round, which everything I read from like people that I trust, like he was a first round caliber player and fell for whatever reason. He's massive. I'm pretty sure he's like 6'8", 350.
I think
Yeah,
it was a
that's
fourth.
375. Like he's an absolute behemoth. I saw him up close and personal last year when I was equipment manager, ball boy for the Wisconsin football team, and we played at Ohio State and unfortunately got murdered. That's gonna change this year when we play him at home this year. But he is like absolutely massive. Him and Paris Johnson were crazy tackle duo to have on a college team. But he, I think, is going to play a role at some point for this team, and he is a very good player. And honestly, the tight end room is really good too. David Njoku, insane athlete, very good. Jordan Akins coming over. I forgot they even signed him. And then Harrison Bryant's a good player too. So their offensive roster is very good, and it all starts with that offensive line. And it's going to end with Deshaun Watson and see how good he is. They have a very wide range of outcomes they have the widest range of outcomes, in my opinion, from the quarterback position. He could be back to full form and he could be top 3 to 5. Or he could be like he was last year and they could be a 31.
Yeah.
Like he was horrible last year. Jacoby Brissett was very much better than him last year.
He was. They were towards the end, like when I want to maybe I'm misremembering, but by the time they got to the Bills game, they were in the playoff race.
Yeah, they were. They were not a bad team last year.
They were good up until kind of down that stretch.
Yeah. And then moving on to the defense, they have a good defensive roster too. Obviously, it starts with Myles Garrett. He's in that conversation for best edge rusher in the league, like we just talked about with TJ Watt for sure. Zadarius Smith coming over too, like that's a great number 2 pass rusher. And they have Ogbonnia Okoronkwo, who's another good player from Houston, coming over that's going to play a role on third downs, spelling these guys off the edge. Delvin Tomlinson coming over as well, and they draft Siaki Ika, who's a good run stuffer. That was kind of where they weren't great last year on the interior defensive line, and they kind of had some pieces to help that. The linebackers are very interesting with JOK is always an interesting chess piece to have. Anthony Walker's fine. Taki's all right. But that's kind of like we've talked about before. Like your linebackers don't necessarily need to be the strength of your defense. And then they have some interesting pieces in the secondary as well. Denzel Ward, lockdown corner. Greg Newsome's a great player. I like Juan Thornhill. Grant Delpit's always an interesting player. So they have a lot of talent on this roster as a whole. It's just very weird to be in the like they have a really good roster, and that could be paired with Deshaun Watson, who could finish anywhere from third best quarterback in the NFL to 31st. So what does that mean? I have no idea what to do with that.
Only question I have about the defense, you kind of mentioned it. Obviously, Delvin Tomlinson is like a very good run stuffing D tackle, but they were like on pace at a certain point last year. Like they were on pace to be a historically bad run defense at a certain point. Like Devin Singletary like ate their lunch or ate, you know what I mean? Last year, like at a certain point, it was like so bad that they obviously addressed it. But do you think they addressed it enough for it to actually like not be as big of a problem? Because they were getting gashed last year, really.
Run defense again is one of those things where you don't need to be like the number 1 run defense in the NFL.
Yeah.
And you don't even need to be like necessarily top 10. You just need to not be in that like 25 to 32 like god awful where people are going to average 60 yards a carry against you. That's where you need kind of like the same conversation with offensive line where it doesn't necessarily need to be 5 elite players. It just needs to be 5 people that don't suck. It's kind of similar with run defense. And they were in that awful spot last year. And I think they made enough changes, to be honest, to be not horrible, not necessarily going to be amazing, but not horrible. And I think that's going to make a difference. Like, God, this team is so like I was working through my predictions for the whole NFL season the other day, just kind of like going through every game to see where I have all these records for every team. And the Browns are just so confusing because they have such a good roster. And it's like, okay, well, do they have if you have an amazing roster and the 30th best quarterback, you're not that good. But if you have the best roster or a really good roster and the 10th best quarterback, you're really good. So this is the most difficult team to evaluate for me.
Last thing I'll say on the defense, they're definitely the hardest to evaluate in this division. Last thing on the defense, though, hey, Jim Schwartz.
Yeah.
Corner, I think that's a great. I think Jim Schwartz is maybe just speaking historically, but like Jim Schwartz,
He's coached some
obviously
good defense.
a very good defensive coach. I don't maybe expect it. What did he say? He was like, we're not going to be first in points per game. We're going to be first in swag. I don't know if that's a good sign or not, but I don't know. I like Jim Schwartz. I think he's a very good coach. He's done a lot of good for the game of football, and I think he's going to make it work with the defense. Yeah, I think the big question obviously is what is Deshaun Watson, if anything. And I mean, he's going to play 17 games. If he's healthy, like they're not going to bench him. He's getting paid.
Back to my original question. What is your like prediction for the Browns? Are they a playoff team?
I don't. I can't say that they are based off of Deshaun Watson from last year.
It's
Like, and that's the thing is like I do think like it's the whole Mr. Gordonier, our APUS teacher, used to say, he was like, everyone wants to say, like yes, and everyone wants to say no, but it's somewhere in the middle. And it's like he's not the top three quarterback he was
right
years ago, but he's not the 31st best quarterback like he was last year. He's somewhere in the middle. It just depends. Is he the 20th guy or the 10th guy? Because if he's the 10th guy, they're probably a playoff team. If he's the 20th guy, they're probably on the outside looking in.
Yeah. All right. Final question to wrap this up. Do you think where does this division rank across divisions in the NFL?
Ooh, it's a good question. I don't think it's good as the AFC East. It's better than the AFC South. AFC West. Oh, AFC West is tough. I would,
I think the Raiders makes the West lose it. In my opinion.
yeah, I
I
would
think the
agree.
Raiders are gonna be really bad.
So, and then in
What
terms
is
of the
AFC? I think the Raiders
NFC,
are gonna be very
it's
bad.
better than the NFC West. It's better than the NFC South. Probably, it's about on par with the NFC East, I would say, and then it's better than the NFC North. So the AFC East is probably the one division I can solidly say the AFC East is better.
Yeah, I cannot blame you for that at all. I think if the Browns, if Deshaun Watson is closer to that 10 mark, I think the AFC North could be better than the East.
Yeah, that's fair. I also just think it depends on like what the Patriots ceiling is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because we talked about it in
And
that
Rodgers,
episode.
I feel like the Patriots and the Steelers are kind of pretty even.
Yeah, that's fair.
They're very similar teams with older defensive, very solid coach, very high floor, very limited ceiling quarterback.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's how I kind of see it. They're very similar. I
they're
think
similar.
the Bills and Bengals are very similar. Um, I think the Ravens are going to be similar to the Jets slash Dolphins area where it's got a lot of high upside. And then it's just kind of on the Browns to be if they could potentially be as good as the Jets or Dolphins in terms of comparing divisions. I think because of the unknown, giving the nod to the AFC East as the best division in football going into next year is very fair.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, that is the AFC North. I think we'll wrap that up here. Peace out,
Yeah,
everybody. This was the Start the Rebuild podcast.
appreciate y'all.
All right. Peace out.